Good evening. How's everybody doing? We're a little beyond tired or worn out, as it were. We're at the end of a fast. This is Tzom Gedalia. This is a fast that always follows Rosh Hashanah, unless Rosh Hashanah was Thursday, Friday, and so the fast would fall on a Saturday, in which case it's delayed to Sunday since we don't want to fast on Shabbos. Who was Gedalia? When the first temple was destroyed by the armies of Nebuchadnezzar, he took over the Holy Land, and he, after a while, installed this man Gedalia, who was a descendant of King David, to be the governor of the land. He actually wasn't going to exile everybody, the Babylonian exile as it's called. He wasn't going to take all the Jews out of the Holy Land. He was going to allow Jews to live in the Holy Land. And so a bunch of Jews who had fled during the war came back, and they were sort of starting to reestablish Jewish dominion in the Holy Land, now not under their own kingship, but under a governor, a Jewish governor, serving in place of the foreign power. But there was, I can't even remember his name right now, but there was basically some zealous Jew who thought that, this governor, even though he's a descendant of King David, appointed by the foreign king, shouldn't be collaborating with that foreign king. And so he took it upon himself to bring down Gedalia. And Gedalia actually was given warning that there was a Jew coming to kill him. And Gedalia didn't want to believe it. He said, come on, that's ridiculous. We have enough of a problem fighting foreign powers. We're not going to have so much internecine strife that another Jew is going to kill me. And so when this visitor came with 10 men escorting him, ostensibly to spend the Rosh Hashanah in the Holy Land with the governor Gedalia, Gedalia took that claim at face value, allowed him to come near, and that man killed Gedalia. And killed all the Babylonian soldiers who were around Gedalia. And as you can imagine, this was highly offensive to the Babylonian king. And at that point, all the Jews were kicked out of the Holy Land. And there would not be Jews living there until the end of the Babylonian exile, about 70 years after the destruction of the first temple. When the exiles returned, at that point, Babylonia had fallen to Persia, and the Persian king allowed the Jews to return and to rebuild their temple, and that would be the second temple. So this day is a fast commemorating this terrible, terrible, ugly incident, within our ranks, right? Within our ranks, a zealous Jew killed the Jewish governor and ended Jewish dwelling in the Holy Land for significant time at the end of the First Temple period. All of which is to say, we're really looking forward to breaking the fast. We've got about almost 2 hours to go. So I anticipate that today's class will not be very long because I actually want to get to the afternoon minyan. Afternoon prayers today during Tzom Gedalia also include a Torah reading and a Haftorah reading. And that begins in about 50 minutes. So I want to end the class and have enough time to get over to the minyan, which is just a couple blocks away. Let's light up the darkness. Who is with us as we get together to do some learning on the waning hours of Tzom Gedalia? Yehudit in Florence, South Carolina, Paula in the Great Northwest, Gwen in Michigan, Tom in PA, Rochelle in Modesto, Rebecca in LA, Paula in Chicago, James in Indianapolis, Stephen in Oklahoma, Melissa in Great Neck, Lucy in Minnesota, who is sponsoring today's class. I'll be reading her dedication in a moment. Stephen in New Hampshire, Bill in mid-Missouri, Brandon in Knoxville, Pecan, Colorado, Andy in Virginia, me and my bride, Mazel Tov. Andy, did you just get married? Wonderful. What wonderful news. Sharon in New Jersey, Belle in Shelbyville, Ryan in Florida, Shandora in the Bronx, Shamsa in the United Kingdom. Welcome. So great to have you with us from so far away. And Helena from Finland, who was here at the very first AT Daily. David in Indiana, Chaim in Charlotte. Bill commenting on the story of Gedaliah. Stephen saying, God bless. And thank you, PK. The name of the killer was Ishmael ben Netanya. And I think Bill is saying something, I didn't have time to read it, but zealots, always dangerous. That is a fact. Over there on the YouTube side, Aoife in Ocala, Florida, and Lynn in North Texas. Welcome, everybody. Today's episode of AT Daily is sponsored by our classmate, Lucy Johnson, who's dedicating today's class saying, thank you for your teaching and the joy you bring to it. Though I am not Jewish, learning the Talmud for these last 17 months really touches my heart. I am most grateful, and I appreciate the community as well. What a beautiful dedication. Lucy, may you and all your loved ones be showered in blessings. May the merit of our learning today accrue to your merit and all your loved ones. And we say amen. All right, where are we holding? This is Tractate Beitzah, the 8th volume of the Talmud. These are the laws of Yom Tov, the laws that are common to all festivals, as distinguished from Shabbos. We started the first Mishna with our discussion of an egg laid on the festival, and we saw that Beis Shammai, uncharacteristic in their disputes with Beis Hillel, Beis Shammai had the lenient position that we could eat that egg, despite the fact that it came into existence during the festival and therefore was not prepared for use on the festival. And Beis Hillel were stringent and said we may not eat that egg. And then we saw a bunch of bodies of law, not just laws, but areas of law that can be used to analyze that dispute. Now we move on to the second Mishnah here in Tractate 8. We are on page 9. And the second Mishnah continues examining these differences between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, but it appears that now Beis Shammai is reverting to their usual position of being the more stringent voice in the dispute. Mishnah number 2, Beis Shammai say, one may not carry a ladder, which was used for reaching doves in a dovecote, from one dovecote to another. However, one may move it slightly so that he tilts it from one window to another in the same dovecote, and Beis Hillel permit even carrying a ladder from one dovecote to another. What are we talking about? Here we're talking about doves that are going to be taken during the festival for eating, right? So these are like, they're definitely dishes, right, that feature small birds. So they're going to eat these doves, and it's permitted to cook on the festival, and it's permitted to slaughter an animal, as we've seen, in order to roast it and eat it on the festival. Okay, well, where are the doves located? They're in the dovecote. How do you get to the dovecote? You have to walk up this ladder to get them. Can you move the ladder? Why is this a problem? Just like on Shabbos, you cannot carry a ladder in the public domain. Okay, how far are we going to carry this ladder? We're really only moving it within the dovecote. You're allowed to carry something as long as it's less than 4 cubits, about 6 feet. So maybe we're going to be less than that, but there's still going to be an issue here where if somebody sees you moving a ladder from one place to another around your home, what are they going to think? They're going to think that you're doing repairs on your home, and they're going to look at that guy and say, hey, he's violating the festival. He's going to go up and fix his roof because maybe he's got a leak in the roof. He wants to plaster the hole so water doesn't come in. That is definitely prohibited labor on a festival, just as it is on Shabbos. So even though all he's doing is moving this ladder so that he can get a dove from the dovecote so that he can cook it, which is permitted, we have an issue of maris ha'ayin, the appearance to the eye of a prohibition. In other words, as we say in English, the appearance of impropriety. I'll just note before we get into the analysis of this, that just yesterday, after Rosh Hashanah ended, we were just kind of hanging out, resting, and I showed Nina this funny video that came across my phone where people said, if you carry a ladder, you can go anywhere. And as a prank, they just walked into a movie theater, and actually a movie theater right near our house at the Grove, a nice little shopping center with a big movieplex. And so these people were carrying a ladder, and they just walked in without paying for the movie. That was the point, that if you're carrying a ladder, no one will question you. So it's funny that just yesterday this came up, that video, and here we are talking about moving a ladder and what kind of appearance that creates. Okay, that's our Mishnah. Beis Shammai say you may not carry the ladder for reaching doves. Beis Hillel say you may move the ladder from one dovecote to another. Here's the Gemara. Rav Hanan Bar Ami said, this dispute applies only in a case where one moves the ladder in the public domain. As Beis Shammai hold that one who sees someone carrying his ladder will say to himself he must need the ladder to plaster his roof, to prevent rainwater from dripping into his house. In other words, the onlooker will suspect him of performing prohibited labor on the festival. Now, he's not performing prohibited labor. What difference does it make if the onlooker thinks he is violating the festival? And yet the sages are going to protect us from creating that appearance of impropriety. At least Beis Shammai do in this case of moving the ladder. Beis Hillel say, and Beis Hillel hold that his dovecote proves about him that he's not moving the ladder for the purpose of a transgression, as it is obvious that he is placing the ladder alongside the second dovecote, and everyone will understand his intention to do the permitted labor of climbing up, getting that dove, which he's going to slaughter and roast and eat on the festival. However, in the private domain, where where the person will not be observed by strangers, everyone agrees that moving the ladder is permitted. That's how Rav Hanan Bar Ami analyzes this dispute, right? That Beis Shammai say you can't move that ladder in public where people will think you're doing it to fix your roof. Beis Hillel say we're not concerned about that because he's clearly moving it from one dovecote to another. But they all agree that in private, he doesn't have to be concerned about the eyes of onlookers, and so he can move the ladder. The Gemara objects. Is that so? But didn't Rav Yehuda say that Rav said, wherever the sage is prohibited in action due to the appearance of violating a prohibition, then even if one performs the act in his innermost chamber where no one will see it, it is still prohibited. And the Gemara answers, that principle, that if it's prohibited in public, because it might have the issue of maris ha'ayin, right, the appearance of the prohibition, that if it's prohibited in public, it's going to be prohibited in private as well. That principle is not a solid, established principle agreed to by all the earlier sages, the Tanaim, the rabbis of the Mishnah. In fact, they disputed that principle also. The Gemara answers, this is a dispute between Tanaim, as it is taught in a Beitzah. One whose clothes fell into water on Shabbos or a festival may spread them out to dry in the sun, but he may not do so opposite the masses. In other words, in a place where people can see him, lest they suspect him of laundering on Shabbos. He didn't do laundry on Shabbos. He was walking, he slipped, he fell in a pond, now his clothes are wet. He would like to have dry clothes within a couple hours. He'd rather not walk around on Shabbos in wet clothes. So he can take off his garment, presumably he's got something underneath, but he can take off that garment and just spread it out in the sun so that it dries quickly, and then he won't be uncomfortable wearing wet clothes on Shabbos. He didn't do anything wrong. He didn't do laundry. He's just taking something that got wet by accident, and he wants it to dry faster than if he was wearing it on his body. But if he spreads it out to dry, people might walking by will say, oh, that guy, he's drying the clothes that he laundered. He shouldn't have done that. It's prohibited to launder clothes on Shabbos. He's a violator. And so they say, don't spread your clothes out to dry in a public place, but it's permitted to spread them out to dry in a private place. That was the principle, and we encountered this in Tractate Shabbos. However, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Shimon prohibit doing so even in private, right? So if you're prohibited to do it outside where people might get the wrong idea, then you shouldn't do it inside even though they can't see it. And if we ask ourselves why would they prohibit doing something in private if the issue is not that you're really violating any law, but that you have the appearance of violating a law? So why would you prohibit that in private? Because if you're accustomed to doing it in private, you might forget that you can only do it in private and you'll come to do it in public as well. Some say a different version of this discussion. Rav Chanan Bar Ami said, so there's a different version of Rav Chanan Bar Ami analyzing the dispute between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. In this other version, Rav Chanan Bar Ami said, the dispute applies to the public domain, as Beis Shammai are of the opinion that the law is in accordance with that which Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rav. And therefore Beis Shammai apply the decree to the private domain. And Beis Hillel, by contrast, are of the opinion that the law is not in accordance with that which Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rav, meaning that whatever you can't do in public, you can't do it in private either. Right? And Beis Hillel do not hold by that. They say that something that you can't do in public, it is permitted to do it in private. And Beis Hillel are of the opinion that the halacha is not in accordance with that which Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rav. However, in the public domain, everyone agrees that it is prohibited to move the ladder. That's a totally different conclusion. Before we said Beis Hillel even allow you to move the ladder in the public domain. The Gemara challenges this interpretation. Should we say that Rav stated his opinion in accordance with that of Beis Shammai? According to Rav Chanan Bar Ami, only Beis Shammai maintains that anything prohibited by the sages due to appearances may not be performed even in private. The Gemara rejects this suggestion. No, it is a dispute between Tanaim. The sages of the Mishna also disputed whether we extend the prohibition because of appearance of impropriety, that something is not allowed to do it in public. Do we extend that we also don't allow them to do it in private? The sages of the Mishnah disputed that principle. As it was taught in a Beitzah, if clothes fell into water on Shabbos or a festival, one may spread them out in the sun, but not opposite the masses, meaning not in public. Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Shimon prohibit doing so. So you see that there's a dispute among the Tanaim. The anonymous opinion says you may not spread those wet clothes out to dry in public, but you may do it in private. The implication is you can do it in private. You can't do it where the masses can see you. That implies that you can do it in private, and it's only Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Shimon who say not even in private can you do that. So there was a dispute among the Tanaim. As it was taught in a Beitzah. Okay, now Rav Chanan Bar Ami accepts the opinion of the first Tana in the Beitzah, who rejects Rav's principle, meaning they allow you to do it in private. According to the opinion of that Tana, it can be claimed that Beis Hillel also rejected Rav's principle, and they permitted moving the ladder in private, but not in public. Rav, on the other hand, follows the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Shimon in interpreting the opinion of Beis Hillel. But what we saw, the original interpretation was that Beis Hillel allow moving it even in public. Now we're not sure. Is it that Beis Hillel allow it in private but not in public, and Beis Shammai don't allow it at all? Or is it that Beis Hillel allows it even in public and certainly in private, but Beis Shammai only allow it in private? That's the two versions of this. Now, so why don't we just read the halacha where it came out? Okay, so first of all, the halacha on private versus public. Wherever the sages prohibited an action due to the appearance of a prohibition, one is prohibited to perform the action even in his innermost chamber. So that actually we go with Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Eliezer over the anonymous opinion, which is usually more authoritative. Consequently, if one's clothes fell into water on Shabbos, he may not spread them out in the sun to dry them, as this has the appearance of laundering, and it is likewise prohibited to do so in private. One need not, however, remove the items from where they were placed to dry on Friday. If you put clothes out to dry on Friday before Shabbos started, it's going to end up the same result. There's clothes out there to dry in the sun during Shabbos, but they were there since before Shabbos, and you don't have to be concerned that that would create an appearance of impropriety. That's too far removed. Okay. Now, with regard to the Mishnah itself, the Gemara comments, the Mishnah is not in accordance with the opinion of this Tana, as it is taught in a Beitzah. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar said that Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel agree that one may carry a ladder from one dovecote to another to take doves. They disagree only after one has finished at the second dovecote, whether it is permitted to replace the ladder to its original spot at the first dovecote. As Beis Shammai say, one may not replace the ladder, and Beis Hillel say one may even replace it. Right? When you're moving the ladder to get the doves, okay, everyone is going to agree that you can move the ladder so you can get the doves so that you can roast them to eat, so you can rejoice on the festival. Having taken the dove, why are you going to move the ladder back to where you took it from? That's not necessary. It's maybe your aesthetic sense of what's neat and what's not, but why should you move that ladder? But Beis Hillel are saying, and we've seen this elsewhere, that this sort of falling action of the task is still part of the task. You move the ladder to get the dove, the normal thing is to move the ladder back. Beis Hillel is going to allow that, according to this version. Rabbi Yehuda said, in what case is this statement said? With regard to a dovecote ladder, which clearly serves the purpose of taking doves. Now we're going to distinguish between two kinds of ladders. A dovecote ladder and an attic ladder. So a dovecote ladder is similar to what we think of as a ladder today, a lightweight ladder that's easily carried from one place to another. An attic ladder is almost like a portable staircase that was used inside a house that was often left in place so that people could get to that upper story of the house, right? It was a small house. It was not expensively made by the finest craftsmen, so they didn't have a proper staircase. So what they've got is a heavyweight ladder with flat boards, on a slope, and it's really like a portable staircase. That's a much heavier item that can be moved. It's not permanently installed in the house. It can be moved, but if you move that, you're undertaking a much more serious kind of activity than moving the lightweight dovecote ladder. So Rabbi Yehuda said, in what case is this statement said with regard to a dovecote ladder, which clearly serves the purpose of taking doves? However, in the case of an attic ladder, which has a variety of uses, everyone agrees that it is prohibited, as this will raise suspicions. Well, back to Maris Ha'ayin, the appearance of impropriety. Rabbi Dosa says, one may tilt it from one window to another in the same dovecote. Acherim say, meaning others say, usually a code for Rabbi Meir, say in the name of Rabbi Dosa, one may even shift the ladder from one place to another by shuffling its legs. The Gemara relates, the sons of Rabbi Chia went out to the villages to attend to their business. When they came back, their father said to them, did any incident require a ruling of halacha come to your notice? And here we see that sages could be very learned, could be capable of issuing legal rulings to Jews who ask questions about Jewish law, but also were, engaged in earning a living. They had a business. So the sons of Rabbi Chia didn't go out to issue legal rulings. They went out to take care of their business. But while they were out there, because they were known to be sages and sons of Rabbi Chia, they were asked some questions of Jewish law. So when they came back, their father said to them, did any incident requiring a ruling of halacha come to your notice? And they said to him, the issue of carrying an attic ladder to a dovecote came to our notice, and we permitted it. And Rabbi Chia said to them, go out and prohibit that which you permitted. You got the ruling wrong, and now people are relying on your ruling, and they're going to come to violate the law. And they're going to be guilty of violating the law based on your ruling. And the Gemara explains, Rabbi Chia's sons thought that from the fact that Rabbi Yehuda said that Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel do not disagree with regard to an attic ladder, this proves by inference that the first Tana holds that they do disagree. Consequently, Rabbi Chia's sons thought that according to the first Tana, Beis Hillel permit even the use of an attic ladder, and they ruled in accordance with this opinion. But that is not so, as Rabbi Yehuda does not disagree with him, but rather he explains the reason of the first Tana. From where can this be inferred? From the fact that the first Tana teaches one may carry a ladder from one dovecote to another. And if it enters your mind to say that Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel disagree with regard to an attic ladder, if so, this phrase, one may carry a ladder from one dovecote to another, is imprecise, as he should have said, one may carry a ladder to a dovecote. Rather, isn't this what the Tana said? With regard to a dovecote ladder that you carry from one dovecote to another, yes, it is permitted to move it on the festival. However, in the case of that heavyweight attic ladder, which is normally in the house, no, you may not carry it out of the house and outside and over to the dovecote so that you may fetch birds. You should have done that before the festival. Now it's too much of an appearance of impropriety. That kind of ladder is used for all kinds of other things besides fetching doves from dovecote. And so we're going to say that that is prohibited. And the Gemara asks, and the others, the sons of Rabbi Chia, what is their reasoning? And the Gemara answers that they would reply, is it taught in the Beitzah a dovecote ladder? It just says from one dovecote to another, and this simply means that it is permitted to do so even with regard to several dovecotes. They interpret it as, well, yeah, you can take the attic ladder out of the house, and then you can take it to one dovecote, get a dove, and then to another dovecote and get another dove. That's how they read it. They're probably going to lose this argument if they're arguing with their own father. Now, some say a slightly different version of this incident. Rabbi Chia's sons said to him, the tilting of an attic ladder came to our notice and we permitted it. We were asked whether an attic ladder that is already positioned near a dovecote before the festival may be moved from one window to another in the same dovecote. And we allowed it. And Rabbi Chia said to them, go out and prohibit that which you permitted. And the Gemara explains that they thought that that which the first Tana prohibits, i.e. moving an attic ladder, Rabbi Dosa permits it, i.e. Rabbi Dosa is more lenient than the first Tana, and he permits moving even an attic ladder as long as it's from one window to another within a dovecote. And that is not so. Rather, that which the first Tana permits, moving a dovecote ladder, Rabbi Dosa prohibits. He is more stringent, and he maintains that even a dovecote ladder may be moved only by tilting rather than in the usual manner. So we see, because these were oral laws, oral teachings that were sort of formulated in shorthand, there was room for interpretation of what exactly were they arguing about, which kind of ladder was implied, what kind of movement of the ladder. Are you putting it under your arm and carrying it? Or are you just shuffling it over a few steps? Are you taking it from the house to the dovecote, or just from one window in the dovecote to another window in the dovecote? There was a lot of room for interpretation, and that's what led to these debates. The Mishnah taught, however, everyone agrees that one may tilt a dovecote ladder, the lightweight dovecote ladder, from one window to another in the same dovecote. And the Gemara infers, apparently, with regard to rejoicing on the festival, the opinion of Beis Shammai is stringent, and that of Beis Hillel is lenient. And that was the whole point of bringing this Mishnah up as the second Mishnah in our tractate, because in the first Mishnah, Beis Shammai were lenient, Beis Hillel was stringent, and now in the second Mishnah, we reverse that attitude toward this action on the festival. Beis Hillel is going to be lenient, as they usually are, and Beis Shammai is going to be stringent. And the Gemara raises a contradiction from the first Mishnah of our tractate with regard to one who slaughters an undomesticated animal or a fowl on a festival. Beis Shammai say he may dig earth with a shovel and cover the blood so that he'll be able to slaughter that animal so that he can then roast it and eat it on the festival. But Beis Hillel say he may not slaughter that undomesticated animal or a fowl unless he had already prepared for that purpose while it was still day. In other words, he had loose earth ready to cover the blood, as opposed to a domesticated animal. If you slaughter an undomesticated animal or a fowl, right, or a chicken, you have to cover the blood that falls on the ground with dirt, and you need loose dirt that's ready for that so that you're not digging a hole on the festival, which would be prohibited. So Beis Hillel were more stringent. So right now the Gemara is saying, well, look, Beis Hillel were more stringent with regard to these issues of preparing food on the festival. Why are we now going to say that they're more lenient? This indicates that it is Beis Shammai who are concerned for the honor and the joy of the festival, and they are therefore lenient with regard to covering the blood, whereas Beis Hillel do not share that same concern, and they are stringent about covering the blood, despite the fact that their ruling might adversely affect the joy of the festival. Rabbi Yochanan said, and I'm almost done, by the way, so if you got questions or comments, get them in. Rabbi Yochanan said, the attribution of the opinions of the Tanaim should be reversed. The opinion attributed to Beis Hillel is actually that of Beis Shammai and vice versa. In that way, the second Mishnah would square with the first Mishnah in terms of who is lenient and who is stringent. So maybe the solution is that something got corrupted as the Mishnahs were set down and passed along through the oral tradition, and maybe we should reverse the attributions. That's Rabbi Yochanan's approach. The Gemara rejects Rabbi Yochanan's answer. From where do you infer that this extreme conclusion is necessarily the case? A different explanation is possible. Perhaps Beis Shammai say their opinion that it is permitted to cover the blood only there where there is already a shovel embedded in the earth ready for this purpose, and therefore there are grounds for a lenient ruling. However, where there is no embedded shovel, they would not permit one to dig a hole and cover the earth so that they could slaughter the undomesticated animal or the fowl. Alternatively, it is possible to say that Beis Hillel say their opinion that an act is permitted for the sake of the joy of the festival only here, where his dovecote, the place where he ultimately positions the ladder, proves with regard to him that he intended to use his ladder for the permitted purpose. But there, where there is no equivalent proof in the case of slaughtering the undomesticated animal, they were not lenient. And this shows that there is no clear contradiction between the rulings in the two cases. They might come out in a position that one is more lenient than the other, but the way they got there might be by applying principles of law that are consistent with their views in other cases. Beis Hillel is being consistent with how Beis Hillel holds in other cases, and Beis Shammai is being consistent with how they hold in other cases, and we have no cause to reverse the opinions in Mishnah number 2. That's where we're going to leave off this debate today, and we'll continue with God's help tomorrow at the regular Friday time, which is noon Pacific. By the way, we posted on our Facebook page candle lighting times for a bunch of major cities as a reminder and to make it easy. We really want to encourage Jews to do more mitzvahs. So if you are a Jewish woman or a Jewish girl or a single Jewish man living alone, so you should light Shabbos candles. It's an easy thing to do. It really makes a division in time between the working days, the mundane days of the week, and the holy time of Shabbos. So you'll see that right on our page at Accidental Talmudist on Facebook with candle lighting times. And what we asked is, if you're planning to light candles, say in the comments that you're planning to light candles, because maybe that will inspire somebody else to do the mitzvah as well who wasn't planning to do it. Okay. Let's go to questions and comments. Ooh, Google signed me out. I'm signing back in. Okay, Tom, what is the difference between moving a ladder inside your house, even if it would be prohibited outside your house, and the permitted carrying inside the private domain on Shabbos or a festival? It's a really good question, right? Because like the fact is, you can move tables and chairs around your house, right? You have a bunch of new guests coming. You can move tables and chairs to accommodate them. It's not like you can't do any kind of activity that would actually require effort. That's not so. What you can't do is constructive work. That is one of the 39 prohibited labors. And these were defined as the constructive labors that were needed to create the Mishkan, the tabernacle, when the children of Israel were wandering in the desert, right? The first tabernacle, which later was replaced by the temple. And that's why writing, weaving, threshing, harvesting, separating, all these activities that were needed in the creating the materials and the construction, dyeing, washing, laundering. There was all kinds of things that you wouldn't normally associate with construction, but were necessary to create all of the tent, right? The tabernacle was a tent. The textiles, the wood, the beams, the sockets, etc. Forging, hammering, all those kinds of activities. Okay, so moving a ladder, now carrying is one of those activities, right? So it was one of the first things we covered. It's the first thing we covered in Tractate Shabbos, that you can't carry things from the private domain to the public domain or vice versa. And in the public domain, you can't carry more than 4 cubits. But I think what we're seeing here is no one has actually talked about carrying. I probably shouldn't have even mentioned carrying. They said it, the Mishna actually said you can or you cannot carry the ladder. So it implies carrying. But they didn't really say you can't do it because you'd be carrying more than 4 cubits in the public domain. What they really said is, because I guess because you're just shifting it in the dovecote, what's unclear to me is, could you carry that ladder more than 4 cubits in the public domain? Which would definitely be a violation unless suddenly that carrying, just like slaughtering, is going to be subsumed in food preparation, right? Because just like, slaughtering is not the same as cooking, but in order to have an animal to cook, you're going to have to slaughter it, and the slaughtering is going to be permitted on the festival. So perhaps carrying the ladder, even in the public domain, is going to be permitted, but they're going to limit that permit extremely, right? So that you don't do anything beyond what is absolutely necessary to get the animal so that you could cook it. And now they're going to limit it even more because it might look like you're not just fetching a dove from the dovecote to cook it. It might look like you're in the process of repairing your house. So now the carrying that they prohibited because of appearance of impropriety is not so much carrying for the distance. It's just that you're carrying a ladder in public at all. So now the question is, okay, well, so you can't carry the ladder in public. Could you carry it in private? And you're saying, well, you can move tables and chairs around inside your house. Why can't you carry the ladder? But the ladder now is being assigned, this value of, but carrying a ladder is very much related to prohibited work. Moving tables and chairs around your house isn't really related to a prohibited labor per se. Right, ladders are part, we use ladders because we're working, right? Most ladders are used in the course of doing some kind of work, and that's why the ladder requires that charge where it's related to, it's so closely related to prohibited activities that the sages said, don't do it in public. And according to some sages, if you're not allowed to do it in public, you're also not allowed to do it in private. But as we've seen, neither the Amoraim nor the Tanaim are in unanimous agreement about that principle, that if you can't do it in public, you also can't, for reasons of appearance of impropriety, then you also can't do it in private. Paula, does that ladder unfold when you pull a cord, like those that come down in steps? I think you're getting the right idea, right? Like that kind of attic ladder that people have in their houses. There's like a trapdoor in the ceiling, you pull it down, and then that ladder kind of unfolds. They didn't have anything so mechanically, tactile. What's the word I'm looking for? It's almost like a supple machine. I don't know how. I don't know how fine what kind of fine carpentry they had with folding ladders and those kinds of hinges. And there was a note here from Rav Steinsaltz that we don't really know exactly what kind of ladders they had, but the general impression is is that the dovecote ladder is a lightweight ladder, and the attic ladder is not a folding ladder. It's not one that telescopes down from the attic. It's much more a very heavy ladder with, instead of like round dowels as rungs, it has boards, right? So in other words, it's a kind of ladder that you would allow your 70 or 80 or 90-year-old mom to walk up to get to the upper story of the house. It's much more heavyweight than the lightweight ladder where you wouldn't allow, your 90-year-old mom to walk up a ladder to get to the top floor. And that heavy ladder, it's still a ladder in the sense that it's portable. You could take it out of the house and use it because, hey, you're doing construction on the roof of your house. You got workers going up and down, and you're not going to use the dovecote ladder for that. You're going to bring out the heavier ladder. And so that attic ladder, when it's outside the house, much more closely associated with work projects than the dovecote ladder, which is much more tied to the dovecote, as it were. And finally, Yosef, there's a full-scale model of ancient Israelite houses at Harvard Divinity School that shows this ladder and the upper story rooftop. Ooh, I'd like to see that. Thank you for sharing that. If you have a picture of it, please put it in the comments, Yosef. All right, that's what I've got for us today. I am going to rush off to get to afternoon minyan, which has a Torah service today because of Tzom Gedalia. Everyone who was fasting today, if you're on the East Coast, your fast is ended, and I hope you had a meaningful fast and a good break fast. And if you're on the West Coast with us, hang on. The end of the fast is almost here. Have a great night, and with God's help, we'll be learning together again at the regular Friday time, noon Pacific. All the best.